Happy weekend and welcome to another episode of GM Tips brought to you by GM Rick with the Mickey Santa ears. And we got mini GM running around somewhere watching fairies. So, this week's episode, really quickly, will be on converting adventure paths and other material or converting campaign material to your own homebrew campaign. And I think there's a lot of that we do. Now, most campaign material, so for instance, something like this, okay, is written for a set campaign world. Same thing with something like this. Again, written for a certain campaign world or system. How does a GM or DM take that material and convert it? Because I've seen successes and I've seen bads from my own experience and from others' experiences as well. And I really want to hit in on those and go over the things that really will help you to avoid mistakes in converting material to your campaign and making it fluid. And I think that's really the number one key. And so I'm going to hit the number one point being fluidity. You want to have the material fluidly match into your campaign. So how does one do that? Number one, you got to take the time as a GM or a DM to sit down and read the material. Mind you, it is a thick set of material. In this case, let's see, about 150 pages worth of material. Okay, this is a mega adventure, and it's a lot like the adventure paths that you see Paizo do. So these things, or you can pick something out of Wizards of the Coast, or you can pick something out of the Deadlands, or you can pick something out of Fate, or Mutants and Masterminds, or Numeria, Cipher System. So one of the Cipher system events or open legend. And say you want to take this material and convert it over. So what do you got to do? First, you got to have fluidity, and you get fluidity by reading the material. Don't skip it. Don't skim it. Don't just kind of go through it. Take the time, and yes, it is time consuming. So before you ever get into your campaign, set aside, I would say, depending on how much time you have to read in a day, about 3 months. 3 months is generally long enough to read the material. In this case, there are 6 that normally go into one of these adventure paths. This is an all-inclusive adventure path, okay? So, Halls of the Mountain King. Or, in this case, if you have a city like Zobek, from the Zobek Gazetteer in the streets of Zobek, which is another part of their material. Green Ronin has Freeport. Freeport is a huge book. Let me show you how big Freeport is. Give me 2 seconds here and I'll pull it down and show you. So there we go, the city of Freeport. All right, so I've kind of covered the top of it. I like to keep my stuff nice. That's the city of Freeport with adventures. How long is it? Around 550 pages. Some of you folks go, holy crap on a cracker, I hate reading. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, you may hate reading, but that's part of a GM, being a GM. And if you're going to have good material, you want to read it. Now, I know some GMs just want to drop it in and go and then improvise. It does not provide fluidity. I'm just going to tell you that right now from experience. I do not find my campaigns go fluid when I just drop and go. So I tend to read my material well in advance. Number 2, look for things that you got to convert to make it fluid. Like, for instance, does your world have Zobek? And if it does it have surrounding areas like Zobek that you can drop the names in? Because you're going to have to, when you're describing it to players, talk about what nations are interacting with the free city of Zobek. What type of places are there around there that match really well with the original written story for a given campaign? Mind you, this one's written for Midgard. This one's written for Galarian and the Inner Sea. There's ones out of Wizards of the Coast that are written either for Greyhawk or for Faerun. They're written around the cultures, countries, and other interactions. And if you don't make those changes when you're going through the material, you're going to make the mistake of using the description that they give you for the given material it's made for. And your players are going to look at you quizzically when you try to describe to them, and then on the fly say, no, I meant that was this was this country and this city in this country. And they're going to look at you, and you've lost your fluidity right then and there. You can recover it, don't get me wrong. It just doesn't flow as easily as it should. Yes, by the way, if you're wondering, I'm wearing my Santa-ish stuff right now. I'm in full Christmas mode for the little ones and for my older ones. So keep in mind, you want to make sure in the fluidity of it that things make sense. Convert the gods, the temples, the goddesses, the politics going on with the different countries surrounding and nations surrounding. How do they interact? How do they tie in? How do they tie into this story? You've got to ask these questions, and you've got to make notes, and it's going to take a while. And let's be honest, folks, it's not easy. I mean, GMing is not an easy thing, nor is DMing, all right? It's fun to do. It is a great thing to do, and I encourage everyone to try it. But you're going to have to sit down and take the time to try to make things mesh. That way, then, it becomes solid in your mind. Now, when prepping for a session, reread that material so that you're familiar, because what's going to happen is you're going to write it ahead of time. You're going to sit down and sleep on it. Then you're going to write other material, and you're going to totally forget what you just wrote. And I don't care how good you are, unless you got an eidetic memory, which some of you do, and I wish I had your memory, believe me, you're not going to remember the details, and then you're going to really fumble through it. Don't do that to yourself. So number one, how does it fit in? What surrounding areas are there? What interactions and things do you have to change? Reading it ahead of time, reading it again before the session that you're going to run. How does it fit into your characters and their backgrounds? Okay, so you're trying to get them to pick areas of the world that make sense for where their characters come in. Let's be honest, okay? So you got 15 different realms in your area. Picking a realm way far away from where they are, how does that make sense? You have to come up with some reason that that character then took a journey of that far of magnitude to get to where they are today. And you have to help them develop that story. So, development of the character background, again, I go back to that time and again, is really key. And how does that story tie into the current story? It's great when you can get your characters to have some sort of buy-in or tie-in to the current situation. You don't want to give it away to them. Now, I'm going to say this as a DM and GM, do not give away the secrets of your trade to your players. Make it a mystery to them to a certain level. You're peeling back layers of an onion for them. Okay? And so you peel it enough that it makes sense, but not too much that you reveal the inside of the onion. You don't want to do that yet. You want to keep things kind of enshrouded with a little mystery. So that's one of the things you got to do. Now, number two, does the genre make sense for the genre? Okay, taking something like Zobek and sticking it into a futuristic world is not going to make sense. Does it make sense for the type of system you're trying to put it in? Can you easily convert the classes? Because that's something else you're going to do. I suggest keep D20 with D20. Keep GURPS with GURPS. Keep Savage Worlds with Savage Worlds. Keep systems, okay? So I wouldn't take this new game I'm learning called Shattered, okay, and put it into a D20 system. It doesn't make sense. I would have to convert a whole core rule book in order for it to make sense. Don't do that to yourself. If you're going to pick an idea, then do it from scratch that way. But pick something that makes sense. So, for instance, I'm not going to take a mutant and masterminds things and set it into D20 past. Why? Percentile dice to D20 doesn't make sense. I'm not going to take Vampire the Requiem and take an adventure out of that and try to convert it into Dungeons and Dragons. Why? The system and the mechanics don't make sense, and I'm going to make a lot of work for myself to do that. I think sometimes as DMs and GMs, we undertake way too much work, and it overwhelms us. Don't do that to yourself, please. It's just a hint. I've tried it. It's frustrating. It leaves you half writing things, you want to try to pick something that doesn't take too many pages of paper to convert. I would say limit yourself on something like this. So if you're taking this, the Free City of Zobek and the Streets of Zobek, okay, and converting it to 5e, the great part, they have ones for 5e. But if you're doing it for Dungeon World, okay, no problem. It's still a D20 based system for the most part. However, you're going to have to go through and convert the classes. You're going to have to go through and convert any skills or feats. And then you're going to have to convert the story. Limit yourself to no more than 20 pages of conversion. I'm telling you, if you go beyond that, you're really just going to overwhelm yourself. And I'm talking front and back pages, okay? That's how many I would do as a GM. I just don't believe in doing too much. Now, for instance, this is my 6 books of The Reign of Winter. Now, what did I do? I put in a couple other side stories, materials, um, stuff that I need to know for the characters, key materials that I wanted to take in and do conversions for it. I even put a couple islands in there in case my guys want to go out to some islands and go a little bit off the beaten path. Fortunately, the adventure doesn't let them go too far off the beaten path, but it gives me something to work with. And as the players will tell you, some of them went off the beaten path and I was prepared. And that's one of the things that you got to do 3. So number 3, prep around this. So you're taking this city, but your characters aren't going to spend their whole time in this city most cases. They're going to go somewhere outside it. So the outlying villages, the outlying trade locations, maybe even up to the distance of a country away, you want to develop those and stories and little side adventures in there for your players. That way they don't feel railroaded. They don't feel like they're locked into having to be into Zobek all the time. Though Zobek may be their key area that you want to keep them in. Give them that ability to be able to go outside there. So I would put certain things like I would develop your encounter tables. I would develop the city stats for any of the cities or small towns you're going to. Key individuals you would have them meet when they go in there or try to meet. So merchants, bars, taverns, local officials, local sergeant of the arms or guard or captain of the guard, sheriff, and some temples. That's what I would put in there. Okay. That way you have all of those things already laid out. You know what the characters can and can't do. You've got books that you can get NPCs from. I know with Pathfinder, they got an NPC codex. They have other codexes, villains codexes that I can draw down, and I already have set stats that I don't have to roll everything. I know you guys gripe about Pathfinder, and I will give you this small plug for them. Yes, it's a lot of material. Yes, it's a lot of money. But I don't have to do a lot of development work. I can pull a book down, and I have everything I need in that book. And I can easily convert things. And in a sense that the characters never know I'm using that in order to come up with my NPCs. It's helpful, folks. When you're GM and DMing, you only have so much time, and especially if you're working a full-time job where you have to get things done, and this is your hobby, you got to make it simple on yourself. Or if you're married people, or engaged, first rule: do not tick off your spouse, significant other. Don't overspend your time in this. I got a little snark the other day from my fiance where she said, we're trying to have our time. Why do you have that open and are looking at that material right now? Point taken. I got set in my space and I haven't since, and I try not to. It is a bad thing to wear out your welcome with your loved one. It means you're going to have a very good gaming thing, but a very unhappy person at home. But make it easy on yourself, okay? Don't try to do too much by writing your own material. It takes a lot of time, and that's where burnout comes from. And I'm going to be frank with all of you that love to write your own material all the time. Go ask somebody like a James Sutter at Paizo how much he loves what he does, but how much burnout he goes through, or Amanda Heyman Coons, or any of the PMs there, or Eric Mona, or Jason Bullman or Wolfgang Bauer. Ask these people. Gosh, who's some of the other ones? Simon Munoz, who does some side work. Ask any of these people burnout, and they'll tell you burnout comes from the fact that they have to write copious volumes of material, even if it's your job. You run out of ideas after a while. And so don't do that to yourself as a GM. Utilize other ideas. It's okay to not have to create everything from scratch. Um, and then I would say, fifthly, and this is really important, cohesive story of the history of that world to what you're trying to convert. So, for instance, Whirlwind Incursion. What is it about? A quick snapshot. The Abyss ripped a hole into a city in a barbarian realm of Galarian. The people at the city were dabbling around in stuff they shouldn't have done and gave this demon lord the ability to rip the fabric of space-time right there and put a planar hole between the two worlds. So guess what comes flooding in? The Abyss. And so now the world is battling to keep that from taking over the whole world and just leaving it and containing it in one area of the world. How do you take that history and mold it to your realm to make sense? Because there's countries like Mendiv, and there are countries like Ustalav, and some of the Scarwall and Lastwall, and all these areas that surround this country and send crusaders to help fight back the demons. Okay, and even places as far away as Taldor. How do you then convert that to your system? Because you got to convert who is Taldor on your world, who is Ustalav, who is Mendiv, Mendiv, who is Belkson, who are these different realms, and how do they play in, and then how does it play into the history and the story of how this all came about? You have to make it make sense, and that goes back to cohesion again, or fluidity. You got to make it make sense in the timeline. If you don't, you're going to lose people because they're going to go, okay, you just whipped that into your world and that made no sense at all. It was fun, but it made no sense. And that's what I try to do. You've got to write it in. And don't be afraid to write your heroes into it. One of the things that I really loved about the Midgard system is the creator, Wolfgang Bauer, and his bunch took his characters that played in his world for so long and made them into the history of his world. Tremendous idea. Paizo, I think, probably does the same with their characters that the staff play. And that you'll see maybe blurbs on some of the iconics or maybe some of their own. Not saying they are. Don't know for sure. Haven't done the check just to make sure. But it wouldn't surprise me. Don't be afraid as a GM to write past parties into the history of your world. So when this comes about, those past parties had something to do with this, or with the other adventure path, or with the city of Zobek. Makes a great tie-in that really draws the players in, because you're including their characters and their parties in the history of the world. Your version of it, at least. So that's a wonderful thing, and it becomes part of the history of what you write, and it gives it a richness to it that you're not having to invent every NPC. These are PCs that later on became NPCs in the history of life. So it's really kind of cool. So that's my take. It's about 19 minutes. Read the material ahead of time. Try to make sense of what has to be converted. Limit the amount of what you have to write in converting it. Use other people's materials when converting it so it's a lot easier. Try to give cohesion in the history of your world to what are the adventure to your world so it makes sense. And let your characters write part of that history as they play it for your world going forward. If you do these things, if you spend the time with these things, what you're going to do is you're going to reduce the amount of stress that goes on in doing these type of conversions. Great material. I suggest, even if you're playing another system, using somebody else's in another systems that's similar to yours material. It's a great refresher, and it keeps you from mental burnout. Thanks again. Have a great Christmas season, loving the Christmas season. Even if you're not religious, even if you don't believe in all the things, so what? It's a celebration. Enjoy it, folks, and have fun with it. You know, we don't get this too often in our lives, just like Thanksgiving, to be thankful. Make it your own, just like you do your world's. Thanks again, and have a great, great week again.